Welcome, welcome. Another Mids Watch. This one is going to be a nice little fight between two guys I talk about in the Red Pill all the time. This is something from the Ultimate CAD, which I guess some backstory here. He's a guy came here, well put together, a little bit slovenly, kind of did like the good job, happy wife, happy life thing, and his wife ended up leaving. Well, not leaving him, but so he suspected cheating on him. Basically, she had like a dinner reservation with some old college friend, and then when he asked about it later, she lied. He kind of accepted like writings on the wall and decided he's just gonna go do his thing. So he ended up making himself attractive, less unattractive, and he kind of went cold, and he ended up demoting his wife to plate because he's like, I'm going to leave her, but I don't trust her to raise the kids by herself. So I'm just opening up the marriage in the meantime while I leave her on my terms. And he ends up sleeping with half the neighborhood. So as much as people didn't like him from a morality standpoint, it was probably one of the better guys there because, Red Pill is basically amoral. And he was the one that made sure that it wasn't just some kind of LARPing fantasy. So it's like one of those great things. You don't see many of these guys anymore because most of the guys that come here are just, no offense to if you're new to the channel, but kind of like loveless losers. I said what I said. So he talks about this in alternative to the captain and first mate model. He calls it father knows best. You may have heard it by other terms. If you're a regular here, they call it the benevolent dictator. Doesn't really matter. Just understand what we're talking about. And he brought up a little spat we had a month or two before this one from a girl called Phantom Dream 09, which is part of the original Red Pilled Women subreddit. And that's a whole story in and of itself. So just know she was there and she knows what she's doing. She wrote him a very good question about why he would subscribe to the Red Pill and disagree with the Captain First Mate dynamic. And he's like, I've posted my response below. So I should begin by pointing to everybody that the Rollo Tomasi post Mutiny, which casts doubt on the Captain First Mate in a way I could never communicate. And here's my model that I prefer. If you haven't seen it, by the way, I'll make the effort to put a link to the Rational Male's post on Mutiny. To sum it up, though, what it means, what Rollo suggests, Rollo Tomasi, the author of Rational Male, is you're not really having a first officer if the first officer can just bail at the first sign of trouble. So it's like you want to give them the responsibility, but as soon as they want to leave, they're done. So it's not really going to work for you. So it may be helpful for other men to see that the captain first mate arrangement isn't a core template for red pill relationships, despite the fact that you think it's so. However, if it's working for you, then by all means continue. We don't change what's working well. Okay. First, your LTR or your girlfriend or your wife doesn't want to be your first mate. Strong male or captain is essential for a relationship to work. Signing the significant other to the role of first mate implies that you are assuring her that her voice will be heard, her input will be considered, because you love her so much. And you think you'll be appreciated for listening to her thoughts and including her. You will not. This is just leftover blue-pilled fantasy. The captain first mate dynamic allows for mutual frame. And this is not the place for a leader, as you've written about. Women don't want to be told they're being included. This is a joke to women who already know they have the blameless option of abandoning or jumping ship. It's the captain who goes down, right? Now, I highly suggest you read Rollo Tomasi's Mutiny piece where he explains it far better than I could. And one day I'll post a note about the framework I would use. Pro tip, he never ended up doing it. It is me being daddy, the wife and the children are beneath me. This is where the wife prefers to be. She would never overly admit this even to herself. And women will respond much better to a firm, sometimes nice, sometimes asshole father figure than a self-promoted captain looking for her input when she shares zero consequences for her failure. Huey McGill, one of the guys that's been around longer than me too, we talked about it, and he's like, I'm a firm believer in it. Look, one argument I make is that it misses the point that you seek her input to make her happy, and I think that misrepresents the analogy. No, the captain is 100% responsible for the mission. It's his prerogative to set the direction. The first officer sets the role as real good woman. It's her duty to support the mission, and it's your job as captain to let her know the rules of engagement and how to move forward. To further the analogy, I leave the bridge, it's her, as she's my number one. If I'm out of town, I expect her to hold on to the midget, the mission, don't break the budget, send the kids to school, make sure the house is clean. Sometimes in the heat of a battle, I'm confronted with conflicting data. I say, hey, I want to take the kids out for dinner. She says, well, I have a coupon for XYZ that's good for tomorrow night. Well, that's a good first officer because she understands the mission and she aligns with it. Conversely, if I treat her like she's the oldest teenager in the house, I get the feeling I'm leading from a failure standpoint instead of leading to win. So that pro category right there. Another very old school guy, his name's Occam's Username. And I don't think I've ever mentioned this guy before, but he really deserves his own series. He was, I would argue, the original relationship guy, Red Pill. That makes sense? So he had his cohabitation, long-term girlfriend. I guess they were together for 7 years. He has a great series on relationship game. And like I said, I'll talk about it later. And then kind of had a sad tale because I guess his girl ended up just ghosting him one day out of the blue after 7 years in a relationship. So a lot of the red-pilled women laugh and are like, see, that's why he's an idiot. You guys should listen to us instead. And we're like, all right, whatever. Stuff's still good though. And he's like, if you want to get more abstract, which is funny how we all keep like delving into abstractions here, which a little bit up our own asses, which is probably why this thing never got flushed out. Both your daddy model and the captain model rely on male leadership, a male head of the household to be the boss. The rest, where you talk about obligations the captain has, because love reads like nonsense to me. I'm under no obligations at any point, but I find that acting horribly builds the healthiest type, or acting honorably, builds the healthiest type of monogamous relationship. So you can see here a little bit of morality kind of sneaks in where a lot of guys think about acting honorably, acting healthily. I like Yui McGill's method of looking at it as far as outcomes, like negotiating to win, but he's one of those corporate guys. They're in the engineer and the sales side, so he's really good at that kind of stuff. And then comes in Jack. Why use 10 words when 100,000 will do? He is referenced in almost every one of his comments, the captain and first officer model, and he thinks that's a great analogy. He makes a point against Ultimate CAD's women don't want to be told they're being included. And he's like, you know what? The captain, first officer model should always be implicit. You should act like the unquestioned leader of your household. This is identical to pretty much every red pill technique I've ever seen. Side note from me too, praxeology of the dominant male. This came out like 3 years before this even, so it was kind of known, and it's been fairly well replicated over the years. So again, this isn't kind of like, equal parts here. This is literally something new coming out in the process of us trying to figure out how and if it fits within any kind of red-pilled mental model or toolbox. You don't announce you're increasing your value, you just do it. You don't announce you're considering dread game, you just do it. Sometimes I read critiques about the captain dynamic where the husband is literally telling the wife, you're my first officer, and this is ridiculous. Does anybody think this is actually how you establish a captain and first officer dynamic? And then he brings up the point of CAD's mutual frame. He's like, you know what? Here's an example. I'm offered a job across the country, pays 20% more salary. I'm tempted to take it. When I talk to my wife, she raises some valid issues. Despite the pay increase, the transfer is still technically a lateral move in my company. Cost of living will be higher. School district's not as good. If I say good points, I'll decline the transfer offer. Did I succumb to mutual frame? Learn it so you can forget it and start enjoying it. Brings up the point again about my cat talking about that you're assuring her voice will be heard, her input will be considered because you love her so much. And he goes, I don't consider my wife a first officer because I feel the need to assure her of anything. I consider my wife my first officer because she's good at it. Jumping back quickly here, it's funny that he uses this example because this is actually a very common one. As much as you think it's just like an abstract analogy, happened in my life. When we were first dating, I mean, she had just moved in. We'd probably been dating for over a year now. And this would have been, if you've read Fuck Files, And you read the section there where I picked her up as a girlfriend. Pretty much at the end of the book, that was maybe 2-3 months after we started dating. So this is probably about a year after that. And I was moving to Montreal. Wanted to post me there to a unit. It's a lateral move, whatever. Unquestionably, she's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. Some troubles happened, yada, 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 Batman origin story. Decided to move to Toronto because there was a greater opportunity, more pay, civilian job, contracting hours. I had to leave though, they're like, all right, start on Monday. I still lived in Montreal, had property, it was Friday. So I'm like, all right, we grabbed ourselves like an Airbnb for like a month. And I'm like, you got to handle the house sale. So luckily we had a really good, and she already had friends with a real estate broker. Really good girl. She still sends us Christmas cards, which is nice of that. And she essentially got her to handle all of the details of the moving, the cleaning, all that stuff. Absolutely amazing. We ended up giving her an extra % on commission. She did such a great job. And then my girl packed the U-Haul by herself, drove everything down to Toronto. And then we had the week in between that and the sale in order to, Canadian markets are insane, by the way, as far as how quickly you can sell a house, but at least they were at the time. Then I ended up taking, at the end of the workday, quickly going, looking at places, showing her some photos, getting the one. And between the two of us, we managed to sort out this highly complex thing. So yeah, a competent first officer, I argue, does seem different than just, you want somebody's voice to be heard. It's basically you guys are aligned with your interest to the point where things can get done that you wouldn't be able to do by yourself, which is great. Now, I think I've fluffed the captain first officer model enough. So back to Jack. He says, let's say I disregard her advice and insist on moving my family. We pay too much rent, offsetting any increased pay. Our kid becomes friends with some delinquents at the new school, grades tank, housing market crashes in our old city, so we can't even sell our old house because we're technically underwater on the mortgage. My wife would not shriek like a harpy, and how she was right and I ruined everything and seek to emasculate me. That means she's a shitty first officer and I wouldn't tolerate that. Instead, what I think would happen is I would focus on my job and focus on getting a new one at even a higher salary than the 20% I just received. She would do things like fly back to our old home, find renters until the housing market rebounds, and together we'd figure out what other school options are there for our kids. Brings out the point then of Altmate Cad's blameless option of abandoning or jumping ship. And he goes, if my wife immediately divorced me in that above scenario, this would hardly be blameless. The American court system doesn't care about blame, so yes, I'd be screwed for alimony and child support. But this is true under any circumstance once the marriage license is signed. If I made a series of these decisions where I consulted my wife, then overruled her despite some decent logical arguments and led my family into an objectively worse situation, then yes, on a long enough timeline, she would probably say she's not happy and divorce my ass and live pretty well on the alimony and child support. You could see this as a first officer jumping ship and as the captain going down with the ship. I prefer to see it as a captain can only be shitty for so long before his crew abandons him. Again, see, this is a frame difference here. And you can kind of tell the difference. Cad is basically checked out of his marriage, demoted his wife to plate. So for him, a benevolent dictator makes much more sense. For Jack, in this case, the girl is willing to step up. And even in the case where there's a bad decision to be made, a lot of decisions you make are not based on perfect information. They're imperfect information and you take a chance. In this case, he took the chance for something different. In this example here, it didn't pan out, which is, it says hypothetical, but it seems fairly specific, so you can do the math on this one. But in this case, okay, something went bad. How do we deal with it? And you know what? He's like, yeah, the wife just gets right on board. Okay, the move was a bad idea. It's bad for this, and this reason, so let's fix it. She flies home. She rents out the place. They look into other school board options. He's looking for another job. Basically, they look to rebound it. And this is one of those things that I wish more people would understand about making decisions, especially younger guys, because young guys are terrified to make any decision, because what if it's the wrong one? A lot of girls are afraid of this too, and this is kind of where the captain part of Captain First Officer come in. If you have a relationship in charge by the wife, you will always get the most risk-averse options. And there's nothing wrong with risk-averse, except for there's nothing right with it either. Now, this move in his example here, 20% more pay, maybe this, maybe that, didn't work out in this example that he used here, but it's worked out well in mine, it's worked out well in others. A lot of people will end up take these little risks and make insane more money. In fact, it's one of those red-pilled things. Usually when you run a guy through his male action plan, after the first year, they'll come back with a report, and this is like a year after they've kind of sorted everything out and they've finished it and they've done the 2-year kicking the can down the road. Like all the problems that a guy has, gets past it, makes himself attractive, not unattractive. Essentially, he's red-pilled. Year later, they'll always say some stuff like, it's weird. They're all earning like at least 25% more than when they started. And it's not because, red pill gives you a paycheck increase, but it's just those simple assertiveness things there, a little bit of risk taking here, learning to take responsibility for things here, learning to take control here. And they find that like most families and most guys are leaving money and success on the table just out of an aversion to make a bad mistake or because of a need for validation of the women in their life. And it's just crazy. It's been so consistent. I really want to do its own video on it. But yeah, sometimes the decisions don't go well, but that's fine. As the captain, you're responsible, and the girl has the blameless option of leaving. Sure, but you're attractive enough. You kind of buy yourself, and it's not relationship equity, but it's you've bought yourself like trust in your abilities. You trust yourself in your abilities. You come across as confident, and so other people trust them. And that matters from the start all the way to the end. You could be at the start of the relationship, you act cocky, funny, girl sees you, she's like, holy cow, he's so confident about this stuff, making a move on me. That confidence gives her confidence in succumbing to your frame, I guess is the way they would put it here. But basically, she's like turned on by it, and she's like cool with going with it. Yeah, you trust me? Let's go to the bar. And you go to the bar, and things just happen. Take that same attitude that a single guy uses to get girls, apply it in a marriage where a guy's like, yep, we're moving to Miami to build our fortune in the kicking the chicks out of my apartment on White Claw industry. And you go there and you find out that's actually not great. Somebody pulled a gun on me in the podcast. And if you guys don't get this reference, that's okay. You don't really need to. So then what do you do about it? Okay, well, then you pivot. And the girl's like, you know what? He makes good decisions most of the time. So, whatever, we're going with it. But ultimately, your frame carries over her frame. Now, you can't call that mutual frame because you're essentially still directing how the frame is being influenced here. Anyways, it's interesting. But at the same time, like if you're just nothing but a screw up, laws of power avoid the unlucky and unhappy. And it just turns out that women are more self-interested than men in the sense that rather than going down with the ship and self-sacrifice the way a lot of guys would do, they're just be like, you know what? We tried, didn't work, tried everything. Let's go see a marriage counselor. I want to go to Cancun with my friends. So Jack puts this here, posits. And if you made a series of bad decisions as a father figure, how would your outcome be any different than mine? Something to think about. No matter how you act, girls are still self-interested. If you act like a benevolent dictator or you act like a good captain with a trusting first officer and you're nothing but screwing up the family and ruining the life for the kids, eventually the girl's going to start looking at other options. Doesn't really matter how you get there, but you get there. If you've ever seen my talks on the two different types of men, like the Chad type and the virgin type, and how they end up in the same spot in relationships, well, it's pretty understandable that all roads lead to Rome, and Rome's not happy. So Jack ends with, I'm really trying to see why you think this analogy is materially different. The only thing I can think of is that you think as a captain you must always consult your FO, and this is categorically false. For moving my entire family across the country, I'd consult the wife, but I make my decisions without consulting her at all. Because I feel as confident, it's a good decision, and I know my wife would defer to my judgment. He can consult his FO anytime he wants to. If he has a good FO, he maybe want to do it more often than if he's got a bad one, but he's never required to. And if he's a good captain, this won't be questioned. So I'll leave it on this one. Something for you to think about here. And I know I didn't talk much about the benevolent dictator one, but it's essentially thinking of the girl as the most responsible teenager turned up to 12. She can't really handle things. She's already not going to take responsibility, so why offer the thing? I wish I had more to offer on this one, but usually you're just going to get snippets of it through Ultimate Cad's life. And unfortunately, we've never had to solve this one. Maybe we'll get lucky right now and we'll find out a bunch of new group from my Patreon start deciding to write this stuff down, want to put some post out, write a blog, and they can talk about the benevolent dictator model and we'll see how it carries off. But the one thing I will add is on book 2, which is almost halfway through the third draft right now and making progress. We will find out. I'll put as best information as I can on both the models, and then as the reader, you get to decide which way you carry your life. So I'll leave you on that one. Enjoy yourselves, guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.